Hello everyone, I'm Selena Myers, and guess what? It's spooky season, baby! Which means we're jumping into some spookier stuff, and we're gonna add REM pod because we're talking about exorcisms. Adam? Ask you to step away. Adam, it's not supposed to be haunted in the studio! God damn it. I would like to speak about exorcisms. Can you step away from the REM pod? Are you? Tonight, we are opening a door that humankind has tried to keep shut for thousands of years. Cue the demon! No, okay, moving on. We are stepping into a room where people whisper instead of speak, where a glass of water becomes holy by hope alone, and where prayer can feel like a weapon and a name can feel like a trap. From ancient rituals to today's headlines and familiar names, tonight, we are talking about exorcisms, their history, their legends, their rituals, their failures, and the questions we refuse to stop asking. Is possession real? Is it spiritual, psychological, or something in between the cracks? Why are exorcisms still performed today? And how did the media, the movies, and myth turn private right into global obsession? If you think exorcism begins with a sweating priest and Latin chants, that is only the newest layer to this. The older story is deeper, stranger, and very human. Long before anyone said, "The power of Christ compels you." Sorry, Why? Why when I said that? Can you stop? Step away! They're sassy. I want to know what they want to talk about. Every time I say Christ, it goes off. Christ. Jesus Christ.
The power of Christ compels you.
Let me get through a paragraph. Thank you. People were already trying to persuade the unseen to leave the living alone. Picture the world before modern hospital, before neurology textbooks, before sterile rooms and careful charts. Picture a clay tablet on a low fire, a priest-physician tracing a symbol you do not understand. In ancient Mesopotamia, nearly 4,000 years ago, sickness was not just inside you, it was someone, something, on you. Inside you. Evil spirits clung to the body like burrs to wool. If you woke with a fever, your child coughed at night, if the goat stopped eating, people looked to the spirits to blame and use rituals to remove them. Real talk, growing up, I had a neighbor down the street, and my brother was friends with their son, and he was over for dinner, and their dad was a priest. Fast forward, my brother sneezed. He sneezed at the dinner table, and everybody joined hands, started praying because I said that the devil was inside my brother because he had a cold. Oh God. Stop! Adam! I respect you. Okay, so are you gonna be offended if I turn the REM pod off? Okay, you're gonna be chill. This is your last chance. I know I put it on to have you around, but you're very hard out there right now. Thank you. Even back then, they recited incantations, burned resins, and the air tasted sweet and bitter all at once. They molded little figures of clay as decoys, bodies that were not your body, prison cells, meant to lure and trap the invisible thing causing you pain. This figure would be buried, broken, or burned, and if you recovered, the spirit must have moved on. And if you didn't, another spirit must have come across. The Egyptians stitched medicine to magic like two halves of the same cloth. The Greeks and the Romans added rhythm. They believed that harmony itself had purifying power, and that certain sounds could comb knots out of the soul. Imagine lying on a woven mat while a circle of robed figures chant in tempo that never really quite resolves, beating small drums that vibrate your ribs, asking the darkness to leave you in peace. And the request is simple, the stakes are not. Far from the Mediterranean, shamans carried drums the way that surgeons carry scalpels. In Siberia, in the Amazon, in the high plateaus and the low deserts, healers entered trances, bargained with spirits, or chased them through the underworlds, returning with breathless stories and scratched skin. They burned herbs that cracked blue. They shook rattles made of bone. They spoke to ancestors, to animal guides, to anything that would listen. The methods changed, but the beliefs did not. Something could get into you that was not you. Something could be asked, commanded, coaxed, bribed, sung out. This is one of the oldest layers of history, exorcisms. The world is more crowded than it ever looks now, and the body is not always alone. When Christianity swept across late Roman world, it did not erase that belief, it focused it. The New Testament contained scenes where Jesus confronts spirits as they flee, sometimes shrieking, sometimes bargaining, sometimes naming themselves with an arrogance that feels almost modern. For Christians living in the world where demons had many names already, these stories were not just novelties, they were proof of jurisdiction. Your God can tell them to go. Your God can make them listen. The power of Christ compels you to stop making noise. All good vibes. Thought that'd be fun, but you got a lot to talk about. I'll give you your stage one time. We'll have a whole session, just me and you, okay? You know that dreaded question every night, what do you want for dinner? And the answer is usually, I don't care, anything. Well, that's where HelloFresh saves me. They are America's #1 meal kit, and now they've doubled the size of their menu to over 100 recipes every single week. Not only that, the portions are bigger, the meals are healthier, and you've got 15 plus high protein recipes to pick from every week. And let me tell you, I am not a fancy chef at all, but HelloFresh gives me easy step-by-step instructions, so I actually feel like I know what I'm doing in the kitchen. Plus, the food comes out balanced, delicious every single time. What I also love is skipping those crowded, overpriced grocery stores. Everything shows up right at my door, perfectly portioned, and that means that I'm gonna save money and cut down on food waste. I know you're busy and so am I, and if you want dinners that feel less stressful, this is the way to go. So take advantage of the new HelloFresh by using my code SelenaFM at HelloFresh.com. You'll get 10 free meals plus free breakfast for life. That is 1 free meal per box with your subscription. Click the link in my description. Again, use code SelenaFM at HelloFresh.com and make the dinner the easiest part of your day. Back to the show. By the 4th century, the church had formalized exorcist as a role. It was not a glamour job, but it was a calling. Not every priest was trained to do it, and not every bishop approved it. The church saw a danger in turning the terror into a stage. Exorcism would become a spectacle that would cause harm. Over the centuries, the Catholic ritual was gathered into a book, the Ritual Romanum of 1614, a dense, sober manual that reads less like a script and more like a map. What to say, what not to say, what to do, what to avoid, and most of all, how to protect the person at the center of it all. Holy water to bless and to signal. A crucifix, not as a prop, but as an anchor. Prayers not designed to impress an audience, but to hold the line. The church insisted on rules because without rules, the rite becomes chaos, and the chaos gives terror more rooms to hide in. Permission from a bishop, medical evaluation first, no improvisation that feeds the spectacle, no whispering to the demon like it's a celebrity who needs a microphone. You are not interviewing, you are intervening. Of course, history does not move through rules alone. It moves through people and particular tragedies, and a few cases became loud enough to echo through decades. First, we have Roland Doe. Now, this one's interesting. It was a pseudonym given to protect a boy in 1949 who heard scratching in the walls and the scrape of furniture when nobody was near. A boy whose skin bore marks that seemed to rise from underneath. Words scratched by no hand that anyone could see. The story traveled quickly, from Maryland to the press to the Jesuits, who were called to help. During the rituals, witnesses said that they would later see his eyes change. His voice deepened, objects moved, a mattress buckled, a frame cracked. The case would form the spine of a novel and then a film. And the film would change everything. But first, there was only a boy who frightened the men who came to save him, and then perhaps freed them all by making the prayers stop failing. Anneliese Michael was real and human and young. She lived in 1970s Germany, where the modern and the medieval still brush sleeves. She had a diagnosis, epilepsy, but she also had a faith that spoke about spirits as if they were neighbors that might knock at any hour. She begged for an exorcism. Priests agreed quietly, over time with permission, and with the hope that they were not doing more harm. Across many months, recordings captured a voice that does not sound like the voice of a young woman. Words that tangle themselves into growls and accusations. The names of old villains with shoulders made from rumor and fear. She stopped eating, and she died waiting less than anyone should. Her parents and the priests were tried for literal negligence. They were found guilty, given suspended sentences. Her grave became a site for people who believed, and a warning for those who did not. Whether you see her as possessed or as a patient failed by everyone, you have to say her name softly. She is not a point, she is a person. The history of exorcism is littered with people who were not given that courtesy. Centuries earlier, in Loudun, France, a covenant of Ursuline nuns began to convulse and accuse. Their voices dipped into registers meant for men. They swore in ways that churches pretended women could not. They named a local priest, Urbain Grandier, as the one who lured them into the arms of demons. The ritual was theater and theology at once. Politics braided itself into piety until the rope burned both hands that tried to hold it. Grandier was executed. Later historians would argue that the possessions were hysteria, revenge, manipulation, mass psychological illness. Whatever they were believed by enough people to kill a man, and that is the one true cold fact at the center of exorcism's history. Belief can save you, but belief can burn you too. There are other stories, the Smurl family in the United States, telling investigators that things moved through walls, through them, that it invaded even the most private parts of their lives. Cases in South America where prayer meetings became a wrestling match between a pastor with a hand on a forehead and a voice that calls itself something it isn't. A mother in the Philippines carrying a child into a parish with eyes like a storm. Thousands of small reports that never become novels or films, but live quietly in parish logs and family memories as two sentences. We asked for help. We think we got it. If you listen long enough, one question starts scratching at the door. Are these possessions? Or are they our oldest words for illness or injury of the mind? Psychology is not just the enemy of mystery. It is the friend who keeps you from wandering into the woods without a map. Many of the classic signs of possessions have clinical siblings. Convulsions belong to seizures. Hearing voices belongs to psychosis, to trauma, to grief that grew teeth. Switching between different identities can belong to dissociative disorders. Saying shocking things doesn't require a demon. It requires pain, or the suggestion, or a brain trying to dislodge itself from itself. Not everything is that simple. There are moments witnesses keep returning to in a low voice, a spoken language the person never studied, not fluently, not fully, but with enough rhythm to feel borrowed. Knowledge is about hidden things, a secret sin, a private object tucked into the floorboard that the possessed shouldn't know about, and yet somehow does. Strength that makes 4 adults feel like rope. Sometimes those can be explained by coincidence, by prior exposure, by the mind's uncanny ability to surprise us when it really needs to be believed. Sometimes the explanations feel thin, like a sheet held up against the storm. The Catholic Church has spent centuries trying to be careful here. Before an exorcism is approved, the person is supposed to be evaluated by physicians, by psychiatrists, by people trained to hear the difference between a voice and a symptom. The Church published a revised rite in the late 20th century that emphasized discernment, caution, humility, and the reality that many who ask for an exorcism need other kinds of care. It may feel strange to say this, but the history of exorcisms include a lot of no, we're not doing this. No, this is not for that. No, this person needs a doctor, not a demonologist. The rite survives because the Church has told itself no as often as it said yes. And still, exorcisms are performed today in numbers that would surprise you. Some priests say their phones never stop buzzing. Dioceses in many countries have appointed official exorcists, again, after decades where the job seemed like a relic. Why? Some of it is, honestly, spiritual hunger. In a world that feels both hyper-connected and deeply lonely, people want an answer that cares about their pain. A doctor might manage your symptoms. A ritual might tell the story of your suffering and give you a part to play in its end. Some of it is simply just fear. When the news feeds you a steady diet of wars and strange illnesses and crimes with motives that look like mere images of your own anxieties, a demon can feel like a name that tidies a mess. Some of it is culture. Migration moves rites from one continent to another. A community brings its prayer with it in suitcases. Some of it is the internet, which turns singular cases into viral templates. If a teenager in one country performs an exorcism on TikTok and 1 million people watch, the next person in distress already knows what to do with their voice when it drops an octave. And then there is the media that set the mold long before social platforms learned to count our seconds. The movie The Exorcist premiered in 1973 and rewired the global imagination. Audiences fainted, vomited, staggered into lobbies, clutched by strangers. My mom told me when she went and saw The Exorcist, they actually had ambulances parked outside because of the reactions people were having. And this was in a town that had like 17,000 people. So think of that, mass hysteria. It was hard to overstate what that film had done to public's expectation. Before it, possession had 1,000 forms. After it, many people thought they knew exactly what it looked like. A child, a bed restrained, pea-green sickness, profanity as performance art, Latin like a razor, a priest who looks like he has not slept since God was a boy. The movie was inspired by the Roland Doe case, but it also inspired people back. Victims began to perform possession in a way that the movie taught them. Clergy began to expect certain theatrics. Reporters began to write about exorcisms as if they were using a checklist. The art informed the ritual that informed the art again. It's a loop, and it still turns. The truth is that I have been to an exorcism, and it wasn't like the movies. But some of the moments did match. There was a change of voice. The language the woman didn't know. Truly, the smells are what shocked me the most. There were temperature changes, but this all did stem from a life-altering moment that started a huge shift in her mental health. I truly do believe that good cannot exist without evil. I believe in good and evil. And one thing that I know for a fact is that the next day, after her exorcism, she was a different person. The pain that had manifested and grew inside her was gone. It was cast out. It was insane. And that is why I will never stop speaking about these subjects, about the balance between the dramatics and the truth, the balance between truth and fiction. Now let's talk about other films that followed The Exorcist. Some sober, some gaudy, all of them stitching tropes into us. The Conjuring, rooted in case files of real investigation, puts exorcism in a farmhouse, reminds us that the domestic can be a battlefield. The Exorcism of Emily Rose turns the courtroom into a chapel of doubt and grief. The Devil and Father Amorth, a documentary by William Friedkin, the director of The Exorcist, shows a real Italian exorcist at work and leaves viewers arguing about what they saw, hyperventilation, and the suggestion of something older than both. Beyond cinema, famous names sometimes brush up against the world in ways that feel eerie because fame does not immunize anyone from fear. A pope lays his hands on a man in St. Peter's Square. A camera captures a brief, intense prayer, and experts debate later deliverance, exorcism, or a pastor's quick mercy when a soul is clearly struggling. A well-known actor researches a role by visiting priests who do this work, not for the screen, but for the parish, and later talks soberly about what he heard and felt, not sensationalizing it, just paying attention. A director sits in a room with a priest and a woman and watches her voice change, her body brace against nothing, and returns to his editing bay quieter than he left. These brushes don't prove anything. They simply remind us that even people with names on billboards are human in the face of whatever this is. If I had to boil the influence of media on exorcism into a simple sentence, it would be this. The camera gave possession a costume. In many rooms around the world, suffering has started wearing it. That's not always malicious. Sometimes it is the only language that people have been taught for their distress. Why are exorcisms still performed today? Because people still suffer in ways that feel occupied. Because some who receive the rite support relief that cannot be easily dismissed, a quieting, a loosening, a return of appetite for sleep or laughter. Because for some, the ritual is the story of their healing, their needs, the choreography that makes sense in the chaos. Because in communities where faith is the strongest thread, the idea that evil can be named and expelled is not a superstition, it's a survival skill. Because perhaps most painfully, exorcism sometimes functions as a last resort when all other care is inaccessible, unaffordable, or untrusted. I get that. Placebo, not placebo, depends on what you believe in. We are on a ball of rock, flying through the freaking space so fast, and you're in a meat sack, and you care about what they said 10 years ago? Nothing makes sense! Nothing makes sense! Oh god, I'm feeling really aware right now. I dissociated, Adam. I don't even exist. Do you exist? Oh shit. Guys, we also have to admit that there are darker reasons exorcisms can be misused. They become a theater that re-traumatizes the person in the center of it all. An exercise in power where the loudest voice in the room is not always the holiest, but is always the most certain.
Ego people.
People have been harmed when their illness was treated only as an infestation. People have been shamed when their pain was used as proof of someone else's authority. Part of taking the history of exorcism seriously is refusing to romanticize the rite. It has helped some, absolutely. We can't take that that away. And it has hurt others. Also, can't take that away. The ledger is complicated. And so we circle the burning question again. Are possessions real? Now let's look at a case real quick. In April 2025, a tragic and deeply disturbing case unfolded in Fort Pierce, Florida, when a 6-year-old boy named Ramil was found dead inside his home. The discovery came only after school authorities had reported that he had been absent for more than 2 weeks. So, of course, that prompted a giant welfare check by authorities. When deputies arrived, they were met by the boy's mother, Rhonda, who calmly led them into a bedroom where Ramal's lifeless body lay tucked under a blanket, as if he were simply asleep. But what she told investigators would shock the nation. She believed that her son had been possessed by demons, and that she had been instructed by God to perform an exorcism to save him. According to police reports, Rhonda admitted to placing her hands over Ramil's mouth and attempting to cast out the evil spirits that she had believed were inside the little boy. When he stopped moving, she said she finally believed that the demons had left his body and that he would come back to life in time. Rather than just calling 911, she wrapped his little body in his favorite blanket and moved him to another bed and waited for days, for almost weeks. This tragic incident raises impossible questions. Is there a line between religious belief and mental illness? At what point does spiritual conviction become dangerous? And how do we as a society intervene before belief turns deadly? While it's easy to paint the story as an anomaly, it is not the first time something like this has happened. Across the world, there are documented cases of exorcism that end in injury or death, particularly when mental illness goes untreated or religious fervor overrides medical intervention. In Ramal's case, no neighbors called the police. No family members stepped in. The only reason he was found at all was because school employees refused to let his absence go unnoticed. And it blows my mind to think of how many absences go unnoticed, and they just don't care nowadays. Damn. The horror of this story lies not just in the act itself, but in the silence that surrounded it. Ramal died slowly, quietly, in the place that should have been the safest. And his mother, perhaps suffering from psychosis or spiritual delusion, believed that she was doing the right thing. It's a chilling reminder that real horror doesn't come from monsters or strangers. Sometimes it comes from a love twisted by belief, from desperation shaped by fear. And in the end, a child lost his life, and his mother, whether a killer, a victim of her own mind, or both, now faces the rest of her life behind bars, still convinced she was just trying to save him. So what do you think? Some of you already have your answer. Some of you have a story that you were told in a kitchen at midnight. A story that made everyone lean in and no one laugh. If you want the spookiest answer, it's this. Exorcisms have endured, not because we're gullible, but because something keeps answering when we speak to it. Maybe some of the voices are real, maybe some of them are not. Before we close, let's walk briefly, but seriously, through the faces of the famous who have brushed this world, because the gravity of their names often remind us that fear is not a class that you can graduate from. There are directors and actors who often speak differently afterward. William Friedkin, who gave the world The Exorcist, later filmed Father Gabriel Amorth's, Rome's longtime exorcist, and showed us a ritual that looks awkward and unscripted, messy, and therefore more human than any polished reenactment. The audience was split. Skeptics heard hyperventilation, others heard something older than breath. The point is not what you decide. The point is that a man who built the most famous demon on film went looking for something real and returned soberly without the need to wink. Writers, too, confess that while researching possession, they found themselves praying more, not because the research proved anything, but because the stories made them feel gazed at. That is one of possession's strangest qualities across history. It generates a sensation of being watched. Do you feel it now? Even if there is nothing there, it is feeling and it is fact. I remember actually when I read the book, The Demonologist by Ed and Lorraine Warren. Pause! ADHD moment. I read the book, The Demonologist by Ed and Lorraine Warren, which I find really interesting book. I think it's a ghostwritten book. It was by someone else, but it was kind of about their cases. I found myself feeling watched. I found myself afraid. I found myself walking in a forest and like needing to leave because I felt so creeped out. So where does all of this leave all of us? With a history that stretches from clay dolls pressed into feverish ribs, to Latin whispered into the cotton of a hospital pillow, from drums that make a body dance itself clean, to quiet rooms where a psychiatrist and a priest both sit and both take notes, and neither feels threatened by the other's pen. With two names you asked to hear about, Roland Doe and Annalise Michael, standing at opposite ends of a bridge that thousands of people have tried to cross without falling. How do we help the afflicted without becoming what afflicts them? With a world map full of rituals. The history of exorcism is not only at its core a history of demons alone, it is a history of us and our terror of how fragile our control can be, and our audacity to talk back to anything hiding in the dark, of our creativity in crafting rituals that make fear move. It tells you that we believe in the soul so fiercely that we invented 100 ways to defend it. Are possessions real? I think the more honest question is, what would you do if you believed they were? Most people who performed exorcisms did not do it for headline. They did it because someone was in front of them, eyes desperate, voice breaking, begging for anything that might make the noise stop. In that moment, the choice was less philosophical than pastoral. If you ask me for my headline tonight, here it is. The history of exorcism is the story of how far love will go to try to get somebody back. If you found this deep dive into the history of exorcisms compelling, there are other corridors that we can walk together. Cursed objects, haunted hallways, the psychology of fear, folklore, and the things that built the monsters in our closets. But for now, I'm gonna close this door gently. The room behind it is still occupied, not necessarily by demons, but by all the questions we haven't finished asking. This has been The Haunted Estate, and if you want more, you want true stories, the argued ones, the ones that end in a miracle, the ones that end in a courtroom, stay with me, subscribe. And if you haven't, bring a friend next time, light a light if you most, but make sure you bring an open mind either way. And if something knocks tonight, remember that you are allowed to ignore it. Okay, sleep well, or at least sleep with your covers pulled up. Night, Boo Crew. As if they were using a checklist. The infart. Over the centuries, the Catholic ritual was gathered into a book. The ritual help. Oh! Before an exorcism, I gotta sneeze. He sneezed at the dinner table, and everybody joined hands, started praying because I said that the devil was inside my brother.
The devil and the father Amorth.
The devil and Amorth. Indigenous traditions are dizzyingly fuck off. I have such a bad itch on my foot. dizzyingly